So we've been more than a year into this work from home pandemic kind of situation. And I know I've been hearing from quite a lot of you who could be team leaders or you work with many other people in your team that this adjustment to work from home is a lot more than just, we ourselves or it is difficult, right? But also that you have to take care of the people in your team. And the funny thing is different kinds of people have different ways of adjusting and different types of difficulties. So in today's video, I'm going to introduce to you 8 different profiles and the specific difficulties that they might experience with the work from home situation, and also as a team leader, how can we help these people to sort of adjust a little bit better? So if you belong to this profile, right, so you work with people and you're interested to know how to identify these profiles of your own astrological chart, as well as for the people in your team, you can check out the description in the link in the description below. You can find more information there. So otherwise, if you are new to my channel and you're interested in topics like this, don't forget to subscribe to this channel, right? So now let's get into what these 8 profiles are. And before I go any further, these profiles that I keep talking about, they're actually part of a system known as a Psychological Astrology system. And it comes out with the various placement of planets that will tell me that you might exhibit certain kinds of human behavior. So as we go into the topic of adjusting to the pandemic work from home, I like to sort of divide this into 3 different levels. And the first is a little bit more superficial. So it talks a bit more like certain people have styles or certain preferences that they have in the way that they choose to work. And the second level goes a little bit more into things like how people define like self-esteem or certain indicators that they need in order to know that their work is being carried out. So that's a bit on bit below the surface. And even below that, comes down to a bit of psychological security, right? So I'll introduce each one as we go along. So the first level is a bit more superficial, and 3 of these 3 profiles I have identified belong here. The first is what we call the Venus-Jupiter profile. I also call this the hedonist. So these Venus-Jup hedonist people actually really enjoy the social element in the workplace. So it's things like water cooler gossip in the pantry, lunches with the co-workers, or even meetings. Work meetings to them can be a great excuse to sort of have a lot of these social interaction. And I suppose this work from home situation can be very boring for them. It's always looking at the same screen, and even meetings are Zoom meetings. It's quite hard to get a bit of gossip in between meetings because your boss is sort of listening in. So for a lot of Venus-Jupiter people, what they are craving for is some kind of non-work interaction. So if you are leading Venus-Jupiter people who seem to be sort of going a bit dead because no social interaction, what I've seen some people do are have sort of work lunches where nobody is allowed to talk about work, but then we all eat our bentos in front of a Zoom just so that people can gossip about what happened last Saturday, that kind of thing, right? So that's Venus-Jupiter. Now the next profile on my list is known as the Mars-Jupiter. We call these the warrior. And the warrior is exactly what it sounds like. These people need a lot of activity going on. So it's Monday to Friday morning to evening. And in the workplace, in a physical workplace, it's easy to find things to do. There are meetings to run to, there are places to visit, clients to meet up with. And I think when you're at home, and especially as most of the work that we end up doing is very digital, I do finish, I just sort of email it to you, it can be kind of a bit of a downer for a lot of these Mars-Jup people, the warriors. So sometimes what they're looking for is that physical activity. Now, as a team leader, how do you deal with that? Sometimes it's a bit of, quite frankly, it's creating a lot of activity to be done. So it's linking up meetings one after another. But I suppose that that kind of way of dealing with it can be a bit unproductive. So one thing I've seen some companies do is to incorporate exercise activities together with the group, especially during those months when lockdown restrictions means that people can't go out to the park or to the gym to get their exercise. So it's a good way to get, also there's that social interaction where everyone does aerobics together, or we could all do Pilates together, dancing together. And so for Mars Jupiter, it's at least some kind of activity going on, right? So the third category, I call them Mars Saturn. These are the builders. So for people with this profile, working with their hands can be very important. And I think this tends to show up more in certain types of professions, but it doesn't always, right? So a very more direct example could be, say, if you're talking about a bartender. This is somebody who has to hold the bottles in their hand. They have to hold the shakers. They've got to cut the fruits. So there's all this physical, actual activity is how they carry out their work. And you can imagine during this work from home period where you're not even allowed to be physically in the premises, it can be quite hard to reduce your work to sort of like texting and sending emails. It can be, again, it's a downer for these people and they're not engaged with their work. So I guess for a lot of Mars Saturn people, we kind of need to get a bit more creative. And I have seen how some companies, some leaders have done this by getting Mars Saturn people with skills to sort of teach other people, like, what do you do? Or it's a good time to sort of get Mars Saturn to list down things like procedures, standard operating steps, and sometimes writing the tutorials. And of course, some people prefer to write, and I can imagine some people also prefer to do it and then sort of like video it. And this is great because in a typical workday, Mars Saturn gets to carry out the physical activity and then still be productive and still be useful. Of course, I'll caveat this by saying that not every single Mars Saturn person will be able to carry out the work that they do within the confines of their home. And I think for Mars Saturn, they really do need to sort of continue working in physical premises or to go somewhere and do things. So I would say that if it comes down to deciding which employees sort of come back to the office while others are kind of happy to sort of like, work from home, I would say a lot of Mars Saturn people would probably prefer to go to a physical premises, something for leaders to consider. Okay, so now as we get into a deeper level, now the next three profiles that I'm going to explain about, they belong here because they need to have a physical observation of a structure. They need to see for tangible evidence that they are doing a good job. So let me begin with the first profile known as the Sun Saturn. We call this the achiever. So for the achiever, these are super hardworking people. You should not have any trouble wondering like, is this person actually doing their job when we can't see them? Sun Saturn will work hard, but at the same time, what they struggle with is they don't know if what they've done is correct or not. It's they may do a report and they'll pass it to you. And you know how in a normal workplace, once I've given you the report, you might be able to sort of look at it and say, oh yeah, this is quite well done, thank you, and that's okay. But the problem with work from home is once a report is submitted by email or by uploading onto a system, often there is no feedback. So for Sun Saturn, they are wondering, so did I get it right, or was this good enough? And that anxiety creates a lot of stress because of the lack of feedback. So this one is fairly easy to solve, right? Because for Sun Saturn, they simply need to be told that, okay, this one is fine, or if there's some kind of improvement that you need them to do, letting them know Sun Saturn's going to get it done. And these are the people, they don't mind working almost any time of the day. They just want to get the job done. Okay, so that's Sun Saturn. Now another group is known as the Moon Saturn, and we call this the caretaker. So again, they are kind of similar to Sun Saturn in the sense that they're really hard-working people. But Moon Saturn, because the planet Moon is involved, there's emotions here. So the caretaker wants to make sure that everyone in the team is doing okay. But that's very hard to ascertain when we are all on Zoom, we are on WhatsApp. It's kind of hard to know how people are feeling. Like, are you guys okay? Do you need more rest? And often people are just going to say, oh, it's fine. And for Moon Saturn, they want to know that they're really doing a good job for people. So for Moon Saturn, I think also the lunches that I mentioned earlier, having everyone eat lunch together, we update each other about how our lives are going. This can be very helpful for Moon Saturn because they do need that emotional connection. And I found often that if you are a team leader, there's a good chance that you yourself might have Moon Saturn. And it's a great way for the people that you lead to be able to feed back to you if they're having any difficulties emotionally. Okay, and the third on my list is Venus Saturn. We call this the curator. And Venus Saturn needs a tangible result of their action. So you know how, like, if you type a report, in the past, after you finish the report, you would press print and you would have the physical version of the report on your table. And some of us are very used to having stacks of paper and folders and files on our table. So I think as we've moved into this air era, a digital era where everything is pretty much on your laptop, it can be a huge mental adjustment for Venus Saturn to know that their work has been produced because they need to touch it. So, and I think what they don't realize is that a lot of the bulk of the value that they create is actually in a digital format. So I think for Venus Saturn, this is, quite frankly, is probably not going to change anytime soon. I think documents are never going back to being on paper. But I think for Venus Saturn, perhaps sometimes changing a user interface on the screen. So to sort of like be able to see that we have completed this and this and this. Even a progress bar might actually be very useful psychologically for Venus Saturn to know that we are producing value. Right, or some kind of assessment level to say that, oh, this is how much we've accomplished. Okay, so that is something you can think about. Now at the lowest, the deepest level here, we are looking at more profiles that are very emotional. And these are people for whom relationships are important. And the problem with working from home, this digital era, is an isolation of relationships. And these people also require feedback, just like the achiever and the caretaker profile. But the feedback is different. It's not so much about, is my work okay, or how well have I done my stuff, but rather, do you still like me? Like, are we still friends? And are we still, like, good with each other? So it's the emotional, social feedback that they're looking for. Now, the first profile on my list is the Moon Pluto. We call this the strategist. And Moon Pluto can often be very sensitive to, like, for example, if I didn't hear from you for the last 3 or 4 days. But for all of us who have been working from home, that's quite normal because we don't see each other. And it's quite weird to sort of text someone and say, like, hey, just so you know, I'm still here. So people don't do that. And so there's this radio silence. And for a lot of Moon Plutos, it's like, so how are we doing? I've sent you an email, I've sent you a report, did you read it? And it's quite normal to not receive a response for a few hours. Okay, so what I'm suggesting here is, in order to deal with this emotional insecurity, quite often it's quite useful if people can have sessions. If you're not able to meet in the office, it's quite important to have this sharing and feedback sessions online, during which no actual work is being done, but rather for people to sort of express what are some of the insecurities that they are feeling. And on the surface, it looks like they're expressing work insecurities, but it's going to be very psychological in nature. Okay, so that I hope that helps. The last profile on the list here is the Venus Pluto. These people are known as the transactors. Now, Venus Plutos do their work through relationships. So I'm not suggesting that they don't have any other value besides relationships, but they work a lot on, like, because we're good with each other, then we can get things done. It's in Chinese we call it the guanxi also. So especially in professions where if you are doing sales, or if you are insurance or in property, this is actually quite a common profile that you'll see there, which is why it can be very difficult to continue doing work. If you're selling a property, for example, it's not enough to just send somebody an Excel sheet with numbers on it. It's more like we build a relationship so that you're comfortable having me sell your apartment, for example. So lockdown restrictions can mean that they don't get a chance to build that relationship. So what I would suggest is that, typically speaking, moving on from here, and although the world is very likely to go back to being like not in a lockdown situation, however, this idea of building a relationship via digital channels is going to be pretty common from now on. So what I would suggest is that if you yourself or any of your team members are strongly Venus Pluto, there's something to be said for learning how to build digital relationships. I found that video can work really well for these people, and is to be able to sort of show yourself, tell your story really well in a video, and that's a very good skill to acquire for now and later. All right. So I come to the end of these profiles, and if you have any observations that I haven't mentioned or anything that I've missed out, you might want to share it in the comments below. And you know what, guys? I'll see you in the next video.